Today I'm going to talk about the importance of creating a budget. The government of India, or for that matter, any nation in the world, presents the annual budget at the start of every financial year. Can you imagine what would happen if they didn't do that? Have you ever tried walking on a dark road without a torch in your hand? It would be something similar to that. Budget actually helps us to know from beforehand the different categories where we are planning to spend our money and then keep track of the same. A budget has very definite benefits that it offers to us. For example, it can help us to plan for our expenses and know exactly how much we are spending on each category. It can it can help us to analyze the areas where we can cut back on. Plus, it can help us to save some money every month for regular investments, and it also helps to create a discipline of saving regularly. So, without further ado, let's get into the basics of how we can create a budget. But before that, I would actually recommend you to actually maybe for the initial 2 to 3 months, just make a note of whatever expenses you're making on a daily basis so that you have a basic idea of the different areas where you usually spend your money. And then at the end of the month, you can actually add them up to find out like what is the average monthly expenses that you have. So with when you do this exercise, you will actually have a rough idea of your different expense categories that can actually help you to create a budget. So when you create a budget, the first thing that you have to do is actually break up all your expenses into two different categories, main categories. First one is the need-based expense. So these are the types of expenses that you will have to do at all costs and you cannot do away with them. So like let's say if you're staying in a rented house, it can be like paying the rent every month. You cannot avoid doing that, right? So that's like a necessary expense. Then something like paying the electricity bill or the water bill or whatever expenses you need to do for your groceries and other necessary and things. So these should fall under your need based expense. Then the second category, number two, is the want based expense. So these are the expenses that are not immediately required, and maybe if even if you don't do them, you can still do with them. For example, something that the expenses that I am talking about here are mainly the ones that you're related to satisfying your desires or wants. Something like going out for a movie, or something like going out for a dinner at a restaurant, or maybe like purchasing something like maybe a cool shirt, a cool jeans, or a cool gadget, or anything like something like that. So any expense that is maybe you can maybe postpone also for the later, and that will not have a serious impact on your current state of being. So that is what is actually meant by one best expenses. So once you have done this, right, once you actually, based on your analysis of the last 2 to 3 months, once you've actually put all your expenses into either of these two buckets, maybe the number one need based expense or number two one based expense, it's time to go even deeper. For example, let's say you have put the grocery expenses under need based expense. Okay. Now, what you can do is actually you can go deeper and find out that within grocery, what are all the different items that you purchase under this head. It can be like vegetables, fruits, cooking items, health drinks, snacks, etc. If you have spent money on movies, then think of breaking it up uh, into further subcategories such as spending money on commuting from home to a movie theater, money spent on purchasing movie tickets, movie snacks, etc. And then once you have done that, once you have done this micro analysis, like identified the major heads and then gone deeper and broken them up into further small subcategories, then the next step is actually to allocate a set amount to each category. So be careful while doing this, because you will have to actually stick to this amount every month. So that is the main purpose of creating a budget, to know the different areas under which we are actually spending our money and what should be the maximum limit that we should actually have for each of these categories. So once you have actually broken down all your expenses into either need based and want based, and other again further subdivided them into minute subcategories, next what you should do is actually allocate a set amount to each of them, and you will have to make a promise to yourself that you will stick to these amounts as much as possible every month. So, and the once you have done this, right, you can have some sample budget, something like this, a personal budget of your own. Let's say for need based expenses, You can have something like rent, electricity bill, food. Under food, maybe you can have something like breakfast, lunch, dinner, like subcategories as I told you. Then let's say if you have a cook, you can have some cook salary or maid salary or car fuel expenses or grocery. Under grocery, you can have something like vegetables, fruits, snacks, something like this. Next, under want based expense, you can also have something like movies. Under movies, you can further subdivide them into tickets, commute, snacks, etc. Then dining out and whatever like purchases you do for yourself, like further subdivided them into the different kinds of purchases that you do. And for each category, have a set amount, and then finally add all this up, and then you will know like what is your monthly overall budget. And as I said, do your level best to stick to this amount and not exceed them at any cost. In some months, still that will happen, still you will go overboard, but that is totally fine. There's no need to beat yourself up for that. Just analyze like what are the different categories that you made some extra expenses, and then try to correct it the next month. And another important thing is to always keep some amount as buffer for unforeseen expenses. So based on my personal experience, I have at least seen that no matter how meticulously I plan my budget, still there will be some unforeseen expenses that may be coming up every month. So it's always best to have some buffer allocated for that as well in your budget. Uh, Based on that amount can vary from person to person, but I would roughly say let's keep around 2 to 3 thousand at the least as kind of like an unforeseen expense. That can be like another category in your budget, so that even if something unexpected comes up, you can still accommodate for that in your budget as well. And obviously, the very important thing is to track daily expenses without fail. The budget that you have created for yourself will work only if you do daily tracking of your expenses. The moment you have spent your money on something, always make a habit of entering it somewhere where you are actually tracking your expenses. So these days there are quite a few good apps on the mobile that can actually help us with this tracking, and they have very smart features as well. Like whenever if you link them to your bank account, whenever you make any purchase with your debit card or credit card, immediately it adds an expense to that app. So likewise, many people also like to track it manually through excel sheets. So irrespective of the means that you use to track, just ensure that you track your daily expenses without fail. And then at the end of the month, also keep a day to analyze all these expenses and see uh, where you went right and where you went wrong, and how you basically performed as compared to the budget that you had prepared for yourself. So even if you went overboard, as I said, no need to worry. That happens with everyone. Just analyze it and make sure that you maybe improve by a little bit the next month and keep carrying that momentum forward. So yeah, that way I think you can be actually at a good shape, in a good shape, maybe over a period of 5 to 6 months. So yeah, that's it all from my end. Stay safe, stay healthy, and all the best for your financial future.